I remember how that song goes.
That's a great song. Hello, everybody, and welcome
Hello.
to another episode of the Ginge Pedro Show. I am, of course, your host, Mr. Gingerton. Alongside me, my boy. Hey, buddy. Pedro.
Rang with a beautiful, beautiful camera.
Yeah, but don't talk too much trash. We were having some technical difficulties.
I will not.
Earlier.
I will not. Yeah, the camera is...
The killer's coming from inside the house this week, buddy, so we need to be careful.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have a really exciting guest for horror fans. Viewers of the show know that's been a theme, I'd say, this year, just for funsies. But definitely excited to have a chat with our guest here. And without further ado, let's hope this isn't his final destination. Mr. Jeffrey Reddick. Hello,
good segue. Good segue.
Yeah, dude.
Thank you. I've been holding on to that for like 2 weeks.
Damn. He's been rehearsing that.
Let's hope this isn't my final destination.
Yeah, it was a little bit embarrassing how many times he said that. So
that is the second time I've made that joke on the show. Okay, but thank you so much for dedicating some of your time this week. I'm sure you're a very busy man, so definitely appreciate that.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me, guys.
All right, buddy. So how's the weather out there? Let's get the small talk out of the way.
Oh, the weather's nice. We've been we had a long stretch of rain, which we needed just because the state was so dry, but very sunny like the last 3 or 4 days. So can't complain at all. Can't complain.
Right.
Well, I could, but I'm not going to.
There you go. That's sort of the right outlook, I think. All right, very nice. So we actually have somebody, I'll pin this, but I think this gentleman commented on the Twitter thread as well. So we'll definitely want to ask you about that. It's just saying hello to the chat. Hello to Pops Van Zant. Thank you, sir. All right. The madness is meeting the mania this week. So the way we do the show, Jeffrey, is we sort of like to take it back to the beginning. For each creator, the journey is always a little bit different, but there's always some similarities too. So, for you, did you know you always wanted to be a writer, or is that growing up, was that something in your mind, or could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, growing up, I always actually wanted to be an actor. I loved film and television, but I also loved reading. So English was my best subject. I grew up in Eastern Kentucky, and I think it's the same anywhere. You tell your parents you want to be an actor, and they're like, study something that you can make a living at. So acting was always my dream. I studied it in college. I went to college in Berea, Kentucky, and then I went to New York actually, and for the summer to do an internship or a class at the American Academy of Dramatic Arts. And I got an agent and everything, but it was very tough back in the early 90s to find work if you were a person of color. I mean, to be honest. And so my agent was like, "You're really talented, but you don't rap, you don't play basketball. Like they're just starting to roll." She's like, "You're like an ethnic Michael J. Fox." And I was like, "Well, everybody likes Michael J. Fox." And she's like, "Yeah, but they don't write roles for like ethnic boy next door types." So, instead of kind of giving up on my dream, I was just like, well, I was also interning at New Line Cinema at the time, that summer that I went to New York, and loved the studio so much. I'm like, well, let me just stay here at the studio, and I'll pursue writing, and I'll write parts for myself. And then I kept getting older, and I keep writing about teenagers getting murdered. So can't quite play a teenager anymore.
Yeah, but you sure can kill them.
I can.
Nice.
Yeah. There we go. Nothing wrong with that.
On screen, not in real life.
Yeah, exactly. On screen. Let's not let the false accusations fly here. It's on screen.
So, could we? What were some of your growing up? As a kid, what were your big inspirations? What were some of your first loves as far as entertainment goes?
Horror movies, really. I mean, I got into those at a age that I probably, it didn't traumatize me at all. A very young age, and my mom was really cool. Because, I had 2 friends that, we would just hang out all the time and watch horror movies. And our parents were like, well, we don't like them watching this stuff, but at least they're not out getting in trouble. So they're always at one of our houses. So, so I just always loved, horror movies, comic books, but also like Greek mythology. But some of my Nightmare on Elm Street's my favorite movie because that's the one that really kind of pushed me from liking horror films a lot to like loving them and becoming
wow.
determined to like work in the genre. So
Yeah.
Nightmare on Elm Street's definitely TV wise or feature wise is just the top tier for me because it had such a big impact. New Line Cinema produced that movie, so that's kind of how I connected to New Line as well over the years. So professionally and personally, that movie's so near and dear to my heart. TV wise, like I think the biggest thing that I loved growing up. I mean, I watched so much. I watched everything. Like, but the original miniseries. Some of these kids will have to go look that up, but that was such a mind blowing like sci-fi miniseries for me. So I love that as well. Yeah, those are kind of my two peak things for TV and movies growing up. Were Nightmare on Elm Street and V. But I watched it. I mean, I was just a TV addict growing up. So my mom would, after I did my homework, my mom, and we lived on a farm, so I'd have to do some work sometimes. But once I was done with that, my mom would let us watch, we just watch everything. And I would read voraciously too. I loved reading Stephen King, King Kuntz, like I loved, again, Greek mythology. Like I was really into in comic books, X-Men is like my favorite. I remember my first issue was, and I'm blanking on the issue number. I think it's 157, but it's one where Dracula comes after Storm. And I hadn't really read comic books that much, but I'm like this one looks scary. And I read it. And I was like, oh, this is kind of a horror comic. And then the next issue, I think, was Belasco taking Illyana to, and so I was like, this comic's awesome. And, and it was Storm, Storm's like one of my favorite X-Men. So I was like, and they have a beautiful black woman that, it's kicking ass. This is really cool.
Yeah,
and Dracula,
Storm was always one of my favorites. Like her and Bishop, out of all the X-Men, like to me that was like the top tier. And I don't know, like I don't really like to speak in those terms of representation, but still, because I mean, my all-time favorite X-Men is Gambit.
Yeah,
and he looks nothing like me, but I don't care. I just like his like French like debonair. Oh, I'll kill you with a pod. That was cool, but watching like Bishop being a badass did something to me, and also watching Storm, like those two guys, like that was awesome. I don't know, like growing up in the '80s, because you told me you were. I don't want to carbon date you.
No, I don't care.
But growing up in the '80s, it was such a fertile time for horror films.
Yeah,
you mentioned like Nightmare on Elm Street. My favorite like '80s movie was Silver Bullet.
Oh yeah,
It's like my favorite werewolf movie ever.
Yeah,
and that's the thing. Like there was this whimsy about cinema, especially horror cinema.
Yeah,
and even like I remember there was this production company called Full Moon Entertainment, which they used to make like this cheesy, like cheap.
They still do.
Yeah. Cheap, like films, but dude, they were awesome. They were awesome because they would grab like a premise. And that was the movie, and
that was
no plot, just like blood everywhere, and I don't know, like I don't see that anymore right now. So
there was it was partly I think because people realized horror movies you didn't have to spend a lot of money on them and you could make them, so people were just going crazy with it. So you got a lot of like strange but really fun horror films, but that's also you got the Friday the 13th and obviously like Halloween's, and you have your classics that came out around that time, and then you have cheesy like Sleepaway Camp, which is like its own kind of classic,
exactly.
It was a great time, I think, for horror.
Horror is really, I mean, I'm sure there's niches for other quote unquote B movie genres, but horror really kind of holds a special candle for that. Like there's people that just love horror B movies specifically. So
I think there's a connection between the fans and the people that work on the films that you don't
also
find in a lot of other genres, like except for like maybe Star Wars and like big sci-fi tentpole movies or maybe Marvel stuff. But it is a genre, I think, because horror's always been looked down on, as far as the movie food chain goes. The people that like them, are really passionate about them, and the people that make them are really passionate about them. So I think there's just a really amazing kind of fan creator connection that you just don't get in a lot of other genres.
So I want to ask you just a little bit about since we're sort of talking about what goes into making sort of the intangibles, what do you think? Well, for you specifically, what scared you as a kid growing up? Aside from a scary situation, did you have some specific fear that later manifested in your writing specifically, or?
I don't think so. I mean, I wasn't afraid of monsters because I read Fangoria and I knew.
Oh, nice.
Oh yeah, I still do. So I knew as far as movie monsters go, I knew they were fake. I've said this before, and I don't want to get too heavy, but people actually scared me more than anything because when me and my sister moved to in Eastern Kentucky, it was very backwards when I was young, and my mom's white, and everybody else in the county of 3,500 people wasn't. So we faced a lot of shit, threatening stuff. So it was that stuff actually scared me more than movie monsters. And it still scares me a little bit today, just about how people can turn on each other so easily.
Absolutely.
That's kind of one of my, I don't put that in my work a lot because, again, I've always written stuff to be kind of an escape in a way, and fun. I think there's absolutely a place for really heavy, scary movies, and maybe at some point I'll write one, but they were always a sense of escape and fun for me. So yeah, I never had any weird fears of creatures or snakes or anything like that. It was actually just people that I was afraid of,
I'm sure you've heard this a lot, but one of the fears you've probably created for tons of people is just being in traffic. Yeah. What are your thoughts on that? Basically,
you know what? It's funny because when I wrote the story for the sequel, Craig Perry, who's been the producer of all the films, I love the man. I had the rest of the story figured out, but I originally was going to be a hotel fire for the second one. And Craig's just like, you got to come up with something better than that. And I was driving home to visit my mom and sister in Kentucky, and I got behind a log truck, and I pulled into the next lane, which I always do. And then I pulled off the highway, and I called Craig up, and I was all excited. I was like, what about a truck? And he's like, what? Slow down. I can understand. I'm like, what about a log truck and the chain brakes and he's like, that's the opening. So it's a story of how sometimes life can inspire you. That's why it's always important to kind of go out there in life, because I've been behind my computer for months we were trying to figure out the perfect opening, and that log truck thing just came out of life. And the fact that 20 some years later, I'm still getting memes and videos. It's really
the thing is that's abject, a terror that feels real. Yeah, we've all driven behind one of those trucks full of logs, and it's just if one goes out, I'm gone. So it was completely relatable and horrifying. So thank you.
The director David Ellis, who's not with us anymore, but he did such a great job directing. He was a stunt guy who got into films, and he directed that so well too. I have so much props to him for the way he directed that whole scene. It was just it's one of my favorite openings. Except for maybe Nightmare and maybe Scream. It's one of my favorite openings, of any horror movie.
Absolutely. It's a great, it's definitely one of the most, you can't argue with how memorable that scene is. Still, very popular today. Have you seen Drag Me to Hell?
Yes.
Talking about openings. That movie, dude.
Oh, that
opening. Whoo, just that that little Mexican kid getting drugged to hell. That gives me chills.
That was intense. Oh, yeah.
So let's sort of, since we're talking about Final Destination, how long into working at New Line did that first movie come out? Or, could you talk a little bit about going from that to, what life took, how things...
Absolutely. Yeah, I started interning at New Line in, I think it was 1990. And I worked there for 11 years, actually. I sold Final Destination to them in 97. And it came out in 2000, and then I sold this story for the second one, and then finally they were like, "We love you, Jeffrey, but you're a big boy writer now. Go out in the world and you don't need to be sitting at a desk anymore." but it was a journey. I mean, I learned so much from working at the studio. The biggest thing I learned was that it's not always about the quality of the writing. It's about timing. It's about, like we would get great scripts that would come in. I tell writers this all the time, that would just get passed over because a really bad script came in with like a Jim Carrey attached. I'm not specifically talking about that, but just as an example. So I learned pretty early on not to take criticism personally, which I think is one thing that really hurts, or one thing that holds writers back is we get so afraid to show our work to people, or we don't want them criticizing it. So I learned how to take constructive criticism well. But I'd written several scripts before Final Destination, and got passed on, and I remember I was trying to get a TV agent, and they wanted you to write something like a spec episode of something that was on the air. So the X-Files was one of my favorite TV shows. So I used the setup as an X-Files storyline and wrote a spec. But then one of my friends at New Line, Mark Kaufman, and I was like, this is a great idea. Like you shouldn't send this off. Like you should work on this as a feature. So back in the good old days, you could sell like something based off a treatment. Like you didn't have to write a full script. You could write like a 10-page treatment for an idea. So some friends of mine who worked at New Line started working for Craig Perry and his producing partner, Warren Zide. They started working for them. And so they're like, we're looking for horror stuff. So I sent them like 4 ideas, and they really liked, it was called Flight 180 at the time. They really liked that idea. And so I wrote a treatment, and it's funny because originally they were all adults, who got off the plane, but then Scream came out, and they're like, we need to make them teenagers. I'm like, all right. So we kept working on it. But New Line was having a real problem wrapping their head around not having a physical killer. They're like, we can't do we can't do a horror movie without like a physical killer. And we're like, yes, that's the whole point of it. And it got to the point where they were reworking it and kind of being on the fence for so long that finally the producer's like, well, if you guys aren't going to pick this up, we're going to take it to Miramax. So they're like, all right, we'll pick it up. And we had a pretty quick, once they did that, we actually had a pretty quick, I know 3 years seems like a long time, but it's not that long in Hollywood time. And, it ended up, we ended up going to James Wong and Glenn Morgan, who worked on the X-Files. So I thought that was really, a cool serendipity in a way. And I think they did an amazing job with the film. So, but it was, from 90 to 97, it was like 7 years of like writing stuff and having it, my writing certainly got better, and I read a lot of scripts. Like that was my, I watched movies and read a lot of scripts. So I learned from every pass, what I needed to do to kind of get better and better. But it was a process. People think, oh, you work at a film studio, you have an easy in, and it's like you can get your stuff read, but it doesn't give you a foot up. It almost hurts you in a way because everybody's like, oh, it's Jeffrey, right? And then also everybody else that was working there, not everybody, but a lot of the people working there were working there because they wanted to write or direct. So everybody's, kind of working the same angles, but.
Right. Okay. Very interesting. Okay. So we do have a couple questions for you here in the chat. We like to say hello to our viewers that come by. Since we're still in the 90s time period, I had a question as well, but I can maybe I could sort of bring this question in here. Do you feel like there was any 90s series that got looked over? For me, I would say it's The Wishmaster, but to sort of this question as well. I think NeoStar might call it the Puppet Master series if you're a fan of that as well, but maybe we'll break those into two questions. But
I mean, I think one of my favorite movies, I don't know about this series that came after it, but Pumpkinhead was one of my favorite like movies of that era that great first movie, and then it kind of fell off after that, but that was one that I have always loved. I seem to be in the minority, but I like the original Children of the Corn. Like for some reason, when I talk to horror fans, they're like, we hate that
movie.
It's got Linda Hamill. It's like, it's just,
it wasn't, I mean, I liked it. I enjoyed Children of the Corn. Like I remember it fondly. The second one was a little bit magoo, but
oh yeah, no, they progressively got less
Yeah.
Right. But
Interestingly,
that original one, like, still, like, I watched it recently just because I'm like, maybe there's something that just because I watched it when I was young, and I'm like, it still holds up, you know?
yeah.
They
Also,
want you to Malachi.
that also happens to the first Jeepers Creepers. Like, I really enjoyed that movie,
Yeah,
but it gets overlooked for some reason. It's like, dude, I'm not the advocate, I'm not the producer, so I'm not really going to defend it, but I enjoy it. So
yeah, no, the first movie was a good movie.
Yeah.
I like the second one as well.
I thought the second one was fun. And then same thing. Just obviously the behind the scenes stuff was like hurting that brand as well. But
okay, right. So let's say hello some more real quick, Mr. Ictus. What's up, fellow Florida man, the Gator man himself? Hey, buddy. Thanks for coming by. So after Final Destination 1, could you talk a little bit about just maybe going forward? You know. Just creatively and all that.
I mean, it was really, it was an interesting thing because I'd worked at, again, the studio for so long that part of me was just like, oh, I can just stay here forever and write and, get stuff. I just wasn't thinking like as a professional, like, oh, I sold this project, I should move to Los Angeles. Like that's the only thing business wise that I would do differently. But yeah, after I sold the second movie, I did a TV movie, but I was still going to stay in New York. Like even after I left New Line, I planned on staying in New York. But then 9/11 happened, and I lived like 5 blocks away from the World Trade Center.
Wow.
So, yeah, I ended up moving to Los Angeles after that. So I got out to Los Angeles in like 2002, I think it was. And it was interesting because when I got an agent out here, because I hadn't been out here since '97. Everybody thought, the guys from the X-Files were like behind the Final Destination, even though my name's like on the poster twice and stuff. Like nobody ever knew me. So I kind of almost had to reintroduce myself to the town, which was like an interesting process.
I bet. Yeah.
And then it's like, what do you have next? So I had a lot, it's a typical Hollywood story. There's a lot of scripts that I was either hired to write or sold that just ended up sitting on shelves. And then I had a lot of features that came out and went direct to video, which I'm absolutely fine with. Like I love working, and you're so fortunate if you get anything made. It's been an interesting journey because I've had to practice a lot of patience and lots of ups and downs where things look like they're going and then they fall apart at the last minute. I've had movies shooting like 2 weeks into shooting that fell apart. And so, you just have to really learn to kind of stay grateful for what you have and just keep going and not, there were years where I tried to chase the Final Destination dragon because everybody's like, bring us something like Final Destination. And then they'd be like, well, this is too much like Final Destination, or this isn't enough like Final Destination. So, then you end up putting a lot of pressure on yourself to try to, but, a movie like Final Destination, like that was a real word of mouth hit. Like, it opened at number 3, I think, the weekend that it came out. And the studio was still not sure about it, so they hadn't put a ton of marketing money behind it. But usually, like, horror films drop like 50% after their opening weekend. And when it opened, they realized, like, during the week, it was actually the box office was actually going up. So they're like, oh, this is... So then they started pumping money behind it and actually ended up doing, like, over 100 million worldwide. So it was definitely lightning in a bottle. You can't recreate that because... if the studio had made us put like a killer in there as opposed to death, like it would be something completely different. Like there's so many variables that you just can't recreate it. Like,
and that's what made that series unique is there's not a face to the menace, so that to me was like, for example, when I saw Evil Dead the first time, the fact that the camera was a demon and you only heard like, oh, that to me was like, dude, that blew my mind. And Final Destination is not the same concept, but it's also like the same thing. It's the fear of the unknown. Like you don't know where, death's there, but you don't know how it's coming, how it's gonna look like, but it's gonna happen. So, dude, the suspense would have been completely destroyed if you had like somebody like with a I don't know, with a sight going like, I am death. Like it wouldn't have worked.
I do have a question for you, Jeffrey, real quick. I don't know if this is just like a fan theory. You've probably heard this before, but
is it about Tony Todd?
It is about Tony Todd.
Okay. Is he death or not?
Yeah, that's the question. I'm sure you've heard that a million times, but it is an interesting theory. I mean, at least he's very ominous.
Yeah.
Great actor.
I mean, there's a couple, like, I mean, I have to, when I originally wrote that, the script, his character was different. It was a character who'd been through the same thing as Alex was going through. So he kind of showed up to give some answers. James and Glenn kind of reimagined him as like a mortician which I thought was great because, and plus when I found out Tony Todd was going to be in it, I was like flipping out. Candyman's also one of my favorite movies. Very nice. And, they kept that intentionally vague. And I think we've kept that intentionally vague on purpose because it is interesting. I mean, what I like about the movie, I think one of the reasons, again, I didn't want to put a face to the killer or any kind of cultural thing is because then anybody can watch the movie and not get hung up on, I'm Christian, I believe death is this, or I'm, Muslim, I believe death is this, or I'm Hindu, or I'm atheist, and we just wanted to make it a force. And so I think that ambiguity is also something that goes on with Tony Todd's character as well. Is like, he knows an awful lot to just be a mortician, an awful lot. So,
yes, the plan. He knows
the plan.
Well.
How does he know the plan?
Okay, so we've got a question for you. It was one from sort of touching on one from earlier. Francesco mentioned he was hoping you could speak a little bit more in detail about Final Destination 6, but to a question he has here, do you think Adam Stein and Zach Lupovitsky did a good job with Final Destination 6?
So I'll jump back. I think, we've had 5 Final Destinations.
Right.
So I definitely love, I do think the 5th one is amazing. Like, I feel like they, I've enjoyed all of them. I think a lot of times the 4th one gets like this short rift, but the issue with the 4th one was it had to be written, and we were going into a writer's strike. So they didn't have as much time to develop the script as much as they would have liked to before they put it in production. So I feel like with the 5th one, they had a lot more time and they really kind of made it a love letter to the fans. I mean, we got more Tony Todd. We had some great kills and great characters. And so I think I really love 5. 5 is one of my favorites.
Right.
There's only 5.
5 is the bridge scene.
Yeah.
Right. And 4 is the NASCAR opening.
Yeah.
Correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
And 5 has
that bridge scene was amazing. Yeah.
The bridge scene's great. That the gymnastics scene.
Ooh.
That was the only time in any of the movies where I actually yelled out in the theater or it was a screening room. But when I saw it, like, because I just wasn't expecting it to end the way it ended, and it was that's seen as one of my favorites. So yeah, I think everybody involved in the 5th one did a good job. Like, I'm proud of all of them. Like, I just you get to see different people kind of interpret something that you started, and it's always great. And all the people that have worked on the franchises have been like horror fans. It's nobody who's been like doesn't like horror, but it's like, oh, I'm just going to take this on as a cheap gimmick. I know Final Destination 6. It's so funny. I mean, they've already announced, the writers and the director. I'm very, very excited about the team that they have on the next one. All I can say is it's like there is a next one coming, and we'll find out soon. Hopefully, like when it's coming. That's all I can. I'm trying to be very vague right now.
Yeah, dude. That was very diplomatic, man.
We've already announced the directors and the writers. The script's done. So hopefully there will be like official stuff that I can shout from the rooftops very soon.
Beautiful. Is there any movie you're looking forward to this year that's either coming out or did it already come out? For me, it's Evil Dead.
Evil Dead. I was gonna. That's I'm going to see that opening night. I already got my tickets. So
nice.
Very nice.
Really excited for that one. There have Barbarian. I loved.
Right.
Yeah.
Barbarian was good.
They did a great job marketing that. So I totally went in thinking it was going to be a completely different movie than it was.
Exactly.
And
it was a twist.
Again. Oh man, yeah. So much. That movie is just like Those are the kind of movies like where something can still surprise me, and scare me and make me laugh. And that was such a great movie to watch in theaters. Definitely one of my favorites.
I think last year was actually a really good year for horror. Barbarian came out. My favorite horror movie last year was The Black Phone. I just really enjoyed that.
That was good.
That was good.
Smile. I really liked Smile a lot.
I'm yet to see Smile.
Smile's fun.
Yeah.
How dare you, Pedro?
It's just things happen. You know.
You're like, I have a life, and
I have a life, and I have a woman. Actually, my girlfriend is like a bigger horror fan than I am. She will go nuts when she knows I spoke with you. And the thing is, she's always like, let's see this one, and let's just see. And she's the kind of person who would want to watch like 3 horror films in a row.
Sounds like a keeper.
Yeah. Exactly. So I've seen a lot of horror movies and some of them like I'm already like falling asleep. But it's not because the movies are bad. It's already like 3 a.m. I was like, okay, I'm old. Please.
Pedro's found himself a young lady to preoccupy him from comic book art. This guy.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so let's see. We'll pop into the chat here. Black Phone was probably the most recent suspense story that I loved.
I saw Black Phone. That's not horror to me. To me, it was more like a suspense movie.
Yeah, I have a very broad umbrella for horror. Like, I consider like, I consider like Black Phone horror.
Okay, it is a suspenseful movie.
Yeah, it's like horror. There's horror like blood and stabbing and lots of murder, but there's also horror that's like, again, horror, like real life stuff that could happen to somebody.
Right. Yeah. No, I agree. And also, actually, the director of that movie, Scott Derrickson, is one of my favorite directors.
He's such he's so talented. He's also just an amazing human being as well. So when they always say don't meet some of your heroes, but I've been lucky. Like most of the heroes that I've met of mine have been like super amazing people. So, Scott's just like, he's really talented, really talented guy.
Yeah, Sinister. That's one of my favorite movies of all time.
That's dark. I watched that again. That's a brutal friggin' movie. It's really good, but it's just.
It is. I saw it in theaters. I was excited for it. The marketing just was right up my alley. I also am a big Blumhouse fan, and that was them coming off of, I think, the first Insidious. So they pretty much had me for like whatever movie that was coming out. But I saw it in theaters. I loved it, and that lawnmower scene though, where coming out of nowhere.
Oh yeah,
that got a whole jump out of the whole audience.
Yeah, no, that's a brilliant. And the sequel wasn't bad. I actually enjoyed the sequel too. It's like it's not as scary as the original, but it's a really solid. Like you don't often get like
continuations,
really solid continuations of original movies, and I thought that one was one of the ones that did a good job. Right. Oh, Wrong Turn is another movie we should probably. That wasn't the 80s, but. Yeah, that's another franchise that I think started off amazing. And
Wrong Turn, absolutely.
Wrong Turn,
brutal. Yeah. That was the first movie that ever made me sick. Wrong Turn 4. I remember watching it on DVD.
Oh yes,
that movie made me sick.
I believe isn't that the one where the girl gets split in half in the beginning?
It's the one with Henry Rollins in it.
Okay, I think that's
Yeah, I think the fourth one is the one that they bisect the lady in half.
I just remember buckets and buckets and buckets of blood on my grandma's couch. Like it was. I was. For example,
like I saw Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3 before I saw the first one. So when I saw the first one, it was so raw. Like that made me sick. Yeah, that movie. It's just like.
My buddy Joe Lynch did the Wrong Turn 4. I'm 90% sure that that's the one he did, and it was just funny but disgustingly over the top in a pretty way.
It was the one where they were like filming it was like almost like a game show in the woods.
Yeah.
Okay. Very nice. Okay, so I know you've moved you've kind of worked all angles of movie creation in a way, at least on without sort of doing the technical side, right? You've done writing, producing, and directing. Could you sort of talk a little bit about sort of dispel like the myth of like what the hell a producer actually does?
Well, all the myths are true. because there are definitely people that are producers that don't do anything really. They just, they get lucky. I mean, a real producer, somebody like a Craig Perry, takes the project from like inception and development, is very hands-on in all aspects of the production coming together, collaborates a lot with the director to kind of make sure the director, as much as the director's vision as possible, is maintained while also keeping the studio people happy. So if you're working on a bigger budget film, like they're like on the ground, like fighting all these battles not behind the director's back in a nefarious way, but
behind the
having
scenes,
the director's back, so the director doesn't have to hear the stuff from the studios, etc. And they kind of stay with the project all the way till it's finished and out. So that's what a really hardcore, A-list producer does. And a lot of other people can fall into that pattern and dip in at any point, and sometimes if it's a producer who buys a book that's really successful, they can just come on as a producer and not be involved. But most producers are involved from beginning to end. Executive producers are producers who mainly focus on creative stuff, and oftentimes bring money into the project. Like people get confused because a producer title is higher, but the producer's actually, there goes my cat, getting all in my stand, so it might get a little shaky here. An executive producer does usually focuses on creative and also brings in the financing for a film. So that happens a lot. But I just come in and do nothing.
Okay. Have you ever had an instance where one just comes in and tries to make an absolutely absurd change for basically no reason? Like, is there? How do you just say no? What's the best way to say no to something like that?
It depends on the producer, to be honest. At the end of the day, there's a weird thing going on because everybody does want to make the best movie possible, but there's also a point where people always feel like, well, since I'm on this movie, I have to piss on it somehow. You know what I'm saying? Like I have to do something so that when it comes out, I can point to my family and go, look, I did that. So there's that, it's kind of figuring out, even as a writer, like you have to pick your battles and you have to kind of know the people you're working with. So sometimes you just have to pick your battles on things. And if there's 4 things that they want to change and 2 of them, are going to really make the script bad, give them a little bit on the 2 things that are easier. Because I do know a lot of writers that even people that friends of mine will want me to read their script, but it's like every note that I give them, they just argue with me about. And it's like, I'm just giving you my thoughts. Like, I'm not saying my way is the right way. I'm just saying, here's my thoughts. So, and then they never change anything. So you don't want to be like one of those guys because it is a business and you have a reputation that you have to uphold. And it should be that you're creative, but you also want to be collaborative. Like you can be a mad genius, I guess, in this town and still get work, but those are few and far between.
Right. Kind of everybody wants to be a mad genius, but
everybody wants to be a mad genius, but you have to realize, like, especially if people are putting their money behind you, like you have to be, you do have a responsibility to make sure that they feel like that you're making this as film is palatable as can be to people.
I have a sort of more technical question, I guess. How do you, I guess we could sort of do like, how do you pitch something, but more specifically, how do you say, this is how I'm going to help you make your money back, right, to the investors? Like, how do you present that back to them? Is it just through like ticket sales and DVD, or, I'm sure it's changed over the years, but
it's changed over the years. I mean, the best thing you can do is, first of all, be honest with your people that are going to invest in your stuff. I mean, it's a very risky business because everything is so much out of your control. Like it's a risky business. I think for me, since I work a lot in the horror space, we have the financial backings to show, like, look, you can make a movie for X amount of money, and a lot of movies that have been made for this exact amount have made a lot more. So horror is a pretty safe. If you're going to invest in movies, horror is a safe bet as far as that goes. But then you also need to try to either get like some piece of talent attached, some kind of an actor or an actress that has some value. Then there's also the international value versus domestic. There's a lot of like moving parts that it can get a little maddening, because I know back when I was first writing at New Line, it was like, oh, we like your script, we'll go out and get an actor. And now it's like when you go to studios, they're like, well, who's your actor? It's like, well, I can't make an offer to somebody, like we don't have the money for talent. Like that used to be your job. So now it's expected that you have a lot more put together than they used to expect from you, especially as a writer, / producer.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think it's shifted more to that? That seems strange. It's much more difficult, I'd say.
It is much more difficult, and I think that's probably why it's shifted.
Fair enough.
Because, I did see this kind of change happening, when I left New Line, like where you had business people coming in and replacing like the creatives. So like when Bob Shea ran New Line, Bob Shea was a film lover first and foremost. He was a smart businessman, but he loved movies. And he would take chances on stuff like A Nightmare on Elm Street. Like every studio passed on that movie. He did movies like Blade and House Party and Dumb and Dumber and The Mask. Like all these movies that if you tried to sell them at a studio, they'd be like, that's crazy. You can't make a movie about a guy who puts on a mask and then like, that's crazy.
Great movie.
So we've seen like the shift where like a lot of the studio heads now are people that come from a business background. So all they see is numbers and figures. Yeah. And nowadays, because there are so many people out there trying to get stuff made, there are people out there that can put money behind, like, okay, we'll get an actor attached, because you want to set it up, we want to set it up kind of higher than other projects coming in. But we've seen a lot. I always tell people now, like the studio, just forget the studios, like look at production companies, because if you look at what the studios are putting out, it's all remakes, based on a comic
reboots,
book, book that's really popular, like IP, intellectual property. Like they all want something that's based off of something that already has an audience.
Yes,
because in their minds it's a safer bet. And so a lot of I remember Christopher Nolan said that before the studio would let him make Inception, he had to make 2 Batman movies. Like the first one was like huge, and they're like, you got to do one more Batman for us before, So that just, the business side of stuff has gotten a little crazy, where creativity and unique stuff does have a harder time kind of getting pushed through.
All right. Well, okay. Let's say hello to the chat here. We've got another question for you, but let me say hello to Greg. Hey, Greggy.
What's up, Greg?
Hey.
Hail.
Yes, sir. Let's see.
Or I think it's
it's our little catchphrase around here. Hey,
no, that's why I was like, at first I said hi, and I said, wait a minute, I see the end of it. Yeah. And whoever popped up saying that the Texas Chainsaw Massacre remake, yes, I agree. Like, I think that was probably the time out coming out of the gate strong with Platinum Dunes. Like that first Texas Chainsaw Massacre was like brilliant.
Yeah. Dude, even like the dancing with the chainsaw at the end of Texas Chainsaw, like the first one, stayed with me forever.
Yeah.
Just like, ugh.
So what do you think about this Crystal Lake series?
You know what? To be honest, I haven't been reading up on it just because I've just been busy. I know Brian Fuller is involved. I'm a big fan of his work. So I'm very interested to see what it is, but I think it's a prequel. I think
it's supposed to be a prequel.
So
interesting.
It'll be interesting to see. Like, I always have mixed feelings about prequels. Like, it depends on what they do with it, but it's all started with Star Wars. Like, I love the first Star Wars trilogy.
Yeah.
And then when I remember him saying the next 3 were going to be prequels, and then I'm like, okay, so I'm going to have to wait for like 15 years to find out what happened to these characters in the first movie to go back and like watch a story about, So I've always had a weird love-hate relationship with prequels, because I just feel like we kind of know how I just don't feel like there's a lot of surprises in prequels, because we have, like, tell me more stories going forward.
Right.
That's just my personal take. But again, Brian, Fuller, like Pushing Daisies is one of my favorite like TV shows. Like, he's got a very great imagination. So I'm going to be very interested to see what he does with it.
I'm personally excited for the Halloween. There's a Halloween show they're doing, but it's supposed to be an anthology series, so it won't contain Michael. But which I think that's going to be. People are going to have mixed feelings about that. But as a guy that loves anthology series, I'll take pretty much any excuse for one.
Yeah,
and this could be fun. Now this is where Greg and I have never disagreed more, but I understand why he might feel this way. But the 2016 Evil Dead, while it didn't necessarily contain any original Evil Dead, I think they used the book or at least the pages from the original inside. But that's one of my favorite movies of all time. The Evil Dead reboot. Just because it's pure insanity, and at the end of the movie, I remember sitting in the theaters like, how is this going to get any crazier? And then it just starts raining blood.
Yeah. I liked it a lot. So I can't
it's a great movie.
I mean, again, I'm a big fan of the original. I remember exactly when I watched it. One of my friends that I told you we used to watch horror movies, he had this big floor TV that was huge.
All right.
And I remember I was spending the night at his place. He's like, well, I'm going to go to bed. I'm going to pop this movie in. It's not too scary. And it was Evil Dead.
Nice.
And I'm like 3 o'clock in the morning watching it, 14 or something like that, sitting by myself in this big old creepy house, watching that movie. That movie scared the shit out of me as well. So I loved it. But I did like the reboot. I just thought it was dark and bloody and creepy and fun and
Yeah, I completely agree. It was I understand I remember people not being there is that contingent of people that don't like it because there's not any direct Ash 1-to-1. But if you're gonna do a reboot of a movie, I think that's the most respectful way you could have done it was with that movie, because it was just balls to the wall action, and that sort of Jesus looking guy who just gets
who read that
throughout
book.
The movie.
Yeah, the one that
reads the book.
The one that kept screwing up and reading this stupid book, and it's like, don't read
Stop
me.
reading,
Don't read me. Whatever you do, don't read me out loud. Oh, we'll read it out loud.
So we do keep it about an hour just to be respectful of everybody's time. So we're coming up on that here. But we do want to ask you what you're working on currently. I know you stepped into directing recently. How's that treating you?
Yeah, no, I directed a movie a couple years ago. It was a lot of fun. It was my first one, and it was definitely more of a mystery kind of movie than a straight up horror film. And we had it set up at a studio, but then the studio decided they were going to quit making movies. So then we ended up shooting it on a shoestring, really fast.
Nice.
But for my first one, I'm happy with it for sure. And I'm working on another one, a slasher movie that hopefully we're going to be shooting this summer. So my first I've always wanted to do a slasher movie. I've done all my stuff has been supernatural, so I've always wanted to do a slasher.
There's something endearing about slasher because it makes it more. I don't know. I don't want to say grounded because slashers can get very over the top too. Yeah, but it's not that supernatural thing. It could be any human being. I don't know. That's what I enjoy about slashers.
Yeah.
Right.
But me too. Yeah. There's always just something. Yeah. I love the whole horror genre. So it's again, this is something I always wanted to dip my toe into. So I'm working on that. And I did a couple of cartoons on Netflix, kids cartoons.
Nice.
Really funny.
One of them. Sorry, I was just say one of them was Usagi Jimbo, right?
Yeah. Right. Samurai Rabbit. So it's
nice.
It's a spin-off of the Usagi Jimbo comic book, so it's not an adaptation of them. So I always tell people very clearly. So they're working on an adaptation. But this was a spin-off that we had Stan Lee's blessing on. So it's a fun little kid. It's a YA. It's a kid's cartoon, but it's on Netflix. And I did a Tale Dark and Grim. I worked on that, which is a spin on the tale, Grim fairy tales. So that was cool to kind of stretch my creative wings. But now it's I'm ready to get back to murdering teenagers.
Nice.
Great. Okay.
Very
so
cool.
Thank you for joining us, Jeffrey. We really appreciate it, sir.
It was my pleasure.
It was awesome, man.
Yeah, thank you guys. Have a great day. And then there'll be some news on that sequel everybody's asking about.
Very nice.
So yeah.
Okay. Looking forward to it.
Patience.
I will try to contain myself, but there's no promises that I don't just flip this table over right now and start running around my house. No, I'm just kidding.
Awesome.
Okay.
Well,
Thank you for joining us, sir.
And thanks for everybody who tuned in too.
You too, sir. Yeah.
Thank you
All
so
right.
much.
Take care. Yeah. Bye-bye. Pedro Ang.
What?
How you doing, buddy?
This was awesome, dude.
We just came off that ride, my friend.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm
Jeffrey, if you want to, there he goes. He clicked out. Okay, I don't want to leave him hanging there. All right, buddy. Well, that was a fun show.
Yeah, it was.
Questioned him another 2 hours, but we had to get the hell out of here.
Jeffrey was awesome. I mean, he was very gracious with his time, and thank you. Yeah.
Francesco, thank you for joining us, buddy, and thank you for your questions.
Awesome.
You were a soldier this episode. I hope you hit subscribe and come back again.
Oh.
And all right, everybody, thank you all for joining us. Greg, thank you, sir. There's something we can agree on.
Yeah.
Evil Dead 2.
Yeah.
Movie. One of my all times. Sorry for everybody. Let me say hello. Neo Star. Hey, buddy. Icarus said hello, but we'll say it again. Hello. King Shane. King Toad. Your Highness. Royalty in the chat. What's up, buddy? Who else do we got?
Yeah, dude. I'm gonna watch some horror films tonight. So
yeah, man.
Yeah.
I'm so hungry. I could eat my own arm right now. My stomach's sort of giving me.
Go get some grub, man.
Camera. Well,
so, all right, guys. Back Tropical Magics and Fun My Comic. It's funding right now, and
let me share.
I need some loving, so just share it. Tell your friends if you already read it and you enjoy it. Let your people know.
Let your freak flag fly.
Exactly.
And back this beautiful book.
Yes, sir.
Let me get it in the chat real quick. Fun My Comic, guys. All right. Shadowhawk. Hey, bud. Sorry if I missed you, but now we got you.
Yeah, dude. Yeah.
Great job, fellas. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
All right. We got that in the chat. We still got a few more minutes, Pedro, before I dismiss the class. I know I've sort of already geared that up. We could go ahead. We could go ahead.
Now what we're gonna do? Like you already said bye, and I'm ready to go. Like
I know,
took
you
off
had
my
your finger
pants.
on the button. Everybody's just gonna start clicking out now.
I took off my pants, man.
Your pants were never on.
Exactly.
It's not even.
That's my secret. That's my secret. I'm always angry.
My pants are always. I'm always pantsless.
And I'm always pantsless.
All right, we got a Vic Do. What's up, Vic? You're on the stars.
Mm-hmm.
1 through 2 Stream Patriots. 1 through 2
awesome.
Via Kickstarter. All right.
Yeah.
Hit us up, buddy, and we'll get you on the show. Unless this is, I'm certain this isn't Vic King, but Vic, thanks for coming by, and hit me up, and we'll have you on sometime.
Yes, sir.
All right, guys. I just really love the attention right now. I've sort of got a captive audience, milking it.
Yeah. Let it go, man.
Sex.
Now
really
violence. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Vic says not his book. All right. Just watching the numbers dwindle. My beanie is off to those that stand by us.
Exactly.
For these annoying last few moments.
Yeah, exactly. It's excruciating. It's unnecessary.
I'm soaking it in, dude. This is the only time I talk to people.
Yeah, exactly. It's showing. Man. It's showing.
Guys, don't leave.
Yeah.
Don't leave. All right, everybody. Okay,
right.
You can leave.
Take care.
Okay. Peace.
Peace out.
Try in this thing. Let me get out of here.